Anyone who saw Gridman is not going to be surprised by the topics that are brought up in this episode, from suicide to potentially self-harm when it comes to characters like Hsieh. But it was unexpected with how it was revealed, right? I just feel like the casual way of them all going swimming, they're going to this really fun-looking location, and then you have a character like Hsieh who continues to cover her arm and wears basically a glove that kind of goes all the way up to her elbow, and characters like Yume are very much concerned because it's not like it's a wrist brace, it's not like it's something there, it's clearly meant to cover up something, most likely being self-harm scars. And given these two cousins' relationship and how they, one has no job, he sits in his room all day, she skips school, it feels very much like we're building up to something pretty devastating with her. And then you end the episode with our girl Yume basically being told that it's implied that her sister killed herself, right? There's some pretty heavy themes in this episode, and I'm very excited to see what they do with them, because I think one of the appeals to Gridman is how it balances fun with dark, twisted things, and so far with this show, it's been very natural style dialogue in the face of all of this absurdity. And this episode had so many moments that were, I feel like, no anime director would ever go with. There's a moment where Yume is eating before she goes swimming and things like that. She didn't have breakfast. There's this awkward pause where Yume's just kind of waiting and she's saying, "You can go on." Hardly anything happens before getting interrupted by one of the enemies saying, "Hey, do you want to go swimming with me instead?" There's no reason to have scenes like this, but it makes it feel a lot more organic. Like, hey, you're trying to go on the water slide, but you have to wait for your friend, right? And because this man has a crush on her, he very much doesn't want to just do things without her. He wants to kind of have a date without having to actually imply they're on a date, right? It's the little moments that definitely help an episode like this feel a lot more organic and human in the face of all of these kaiju and robotic looking creatures, right? To have so much fun in the face of all this darker stuff. I think Gamma is one of the best comic relief characters I've seen in a while. This man very much is determined to capture all of his enemies. And this man was basically screwed over by the no running sign, having a lifeguard say no running. And when he did kind of speed walk, he would just slip into the pool. There was so much absurdity with his character. And I think that lightheartedness is what elevates something that could have been dry and boring. If you simply just had characters like Yume and Yume sitting and standing as we watch her eat, some tasty food, that'd get pretty boring pretty quickly. But sprinkling some Gamma being Gamma, you kind of have something that feels both realistic but also batshit hilarious. Now, Hsieh hasn't been my favorite character in this cast. Without a doubt, Yume has been the most interesting, and that's because her sister plotline is very intriguing. It's something you naturally want to pursue and figure out what happened with her sister, what will happen after she learns the truth. But by introducing Hsieh more into the equation, not only letting her start to pilot these mechas, right? It's very interesting to see that alone. We've already had the one guy here, he's, going on dates essentially with apparently a married woman. I thought she was divorced or something. I thought, she was saying she was married, but she was actually divorced. Apparently still married, but it doesn't feel like that marriage is very strong and she's just, wants to be entertained. It hasn't gone sexual or anything, but still, there's something weird going on with that marriage plotline, so he's already starting to put himself out there more. When he's requesting a day off, what's a guy with no job need a day off for? What's the difference between your day-to-day activities? I really feel like Hsieh is starting to feel left behind because I think there was a natural connection between these two because they both were essentially deadbeats. They had nothing going on and they were both depressed together. And now to see him actually want to do things by himself, she very much is probably feeling quite bad about herself. And I'm curious to see the direction they'll go with her arc because honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if there was an attempted suicide from Hsieh. I'll be honest, I feel like they could very well go that direction given the hints and implications. And even without them specifically saying suicide could have been the reason that the sister ended up dead, I feel like many people were probably concerned when we saw her cover up her arm. The darker plot lines mixed with this kind of goofy atmosphere where you have this Team Rocket level antics. They continue to control these kaiju in order to bring about destruction, but as soon as they fail, they go swimming with them, right? There's a lot of absurdity here, and that's what makes, I think, the mystery about what Gamma wants to do and these characters want to do all the better, because obviously they want allies, both sides want allies, but at the same time, their goals are very different. Destroy kaiju, control kaiju to make destruction happen towards humanity, as you have these interpersonal relationships brewing, and it's very interesting for that alone. I really have no idea where they want to go with Gamma's plotline because, I mean, there is so many ways for it to get absolutely insane, and comparing how Gridman ended, I'm curious if there will be able to be that same level of impact for an ending like Dynazenon, in comparison to, I think, a lot of people really coming to appreciate how Gridman concluded. I won't go into spoilers if you haven't seen Gridman yet, but it was a very, I think, revolutionary style anime ending that I'm wondering, with how they're building this story up, are we trying to go as crazy as that, or are we simply just trying to have an ensemble cast where they'll all have their own stories conclude without needing that big impact in order to leave viewers saying, holy shit, I need to discuss this with as many people as possible. It's an underdog, it's an underappreciated show. I think most people watching it week by week are agreeing that it's a really solid watch, but there isn't anything necessarily about this show that's going to grip the masses from a distance, right? The action, while fun, they'll say, oh, but we got this other action show this season that's maybe better animated to them. There's not a ridiculous amount of fan service. This probably episode had the most, I would say, because it was a swimsuit episode on both sides. But there's nothing necessarily, there's not thighs, they're not asses constantly in your face. The dialogue has a lot of, like, natural annoyance, like, oh, you have to wait for your friend to finish eating, or you have to have these awkward pauses because that's just how humans talk. But it's the little things like those that actually make it so compelling, but people just need to give it a shot in order to see the beauty of this show. And depending on how crazy it does get in its second half, maybe that will be the extra level of, like, commitment people need to say, okay, if it does get into these really interesting self-harm stories and this twisted atmosphere, I'll give it a go. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be that interesting. I thought it was just going to be a bunch of people just kind of having casual day-to-day activities as they fight kaiju, right? To me, it's really interesting for that, but I can also kind of see why people may be sweeping it under the rug saying, well, there's a lot of great stuff this season, so I don't want to watch it. To me, I feel like it has been getting progressively more interesting week by week, and for a character like Hsieh not really being that much on my radar, she was getting more interesting for sure, especially given the fact that we have Yume starting to pilot and train her and things like that. But this episode, even if they didn't go the direction of full-on self-harm, there's definitely the implications there, and lines where she's like, oh, are you going to jump to her cousin? I mean, I think definitely after seeing everything we just witnessed in this episode, as jokingly as that scene was, I definitely think the writers are trying to hint at pretty in your face that they're gonna get pretty twisted, all things considered. Do I think the sister actually killed herself? Probably not. I think there's probably something more going on there given the bullying angles that have been implied. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that actually pushed her off the edge or if someone actually was the cause of it, but I guess time will tell, right? Great episode. The OST continues to blow me away. I would argue the soundtrack makes me more excited than even the giant beast fighting. When the guitar starts to shred and you get to just feel like you're at a rock or metal concert and you're just seeing these giant beasts clash together, it's hard not to feel like a giddy kid on Saturday morning turning on the TV with your cereal, watching your favorite show and just watching superheroes be badasses. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below, your favorite moment, and what do you think is going to be going on with both the suicide plotline with the sister and Hsieh potentially self-harming herself. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.